I covered Disney. Craig covers Comcast. I feared Disney overpaying for this asset and having to do what Craig did today, which was downgrade.
And your suggestion is that they are now overpaying?
Oh, yeah, that's his suggestion, too. And
absolutely, right? I mean, remember, the wisdom of the market said this asset was worth about £7.67 before the first Fox bid put it into play. So call it a little bit less than an 8 times multiple. Comcast is paying a 125% premium and double the multiple that the market thought it was worth a little over a year ago. That's going to be a really tough thing. And look, Comcast Cable is still the core of the business, and it still looks reasonably cheap. But it looks less cheap now by virtue of overpaying for this asset. And unfortunately, you now have this conglomerate discount, and I think it's going to take a while.
So you downgraded.
So we downgraded to neutral this morning.
You had a buy. Did you have a price target before?
We had a price target of 41, and we lowered the price target now to 36. So it's trading around what I think the market will say is fair value.
Play this out, though, on a long-term basis. 5 years from now, and I remember, by the way, when Comcast bought AT&T Cable, and people thought they'd overpaid. 6 months later, Enron went bankrupt, if you might recall, and what took place in the markets. And I think 10 years later, we would all sit around and say that actually was probably the best thing that company did. You may disagree. I don't know.
Well, look, Comcast has a history of some very good deals, so I wouldn't dispute that at all. The problem is, so in the Comcast.
Did you like any of those deals before they were done?
Yes. Yeah, we liked the broadband deal, and the NBC deal, while strategically we scratched our heads over it, and I still do, you had to acknowledge at the time you were buying it for a low price at the trough of the market, where here they're buying it at a high price after a 10-year market.
Where do you land?
So, just going back to the valuation point, Comcast paying something like 16 times EBITDA. AT&T bought DirecTV for 8 times EBITDA. And, I think we were talking about this before in the green room that, perhaps the traditional satellite player would be worth even less than 8 times today. So it certainly seems like a very high premium. That being said, Sky is a little bit of a different business because of the common carrier. They do have two-way access through the broadband, which makes it a little bit less risky than a traditional US.
Can I ask you all this question, though? Because all of you, to some degree, are anxious at minimum about how much is being paid here. The alternative would be what? Right? I mean, there's always a counterfactual to this, which is to say that Sky arguably, and by the way, there's very few assets like Sky that would actually put you in an international place if you wanted to be an international business.
Right. I think that's the fundamental question, right? And more importantly, as an investor, do you want Comcast reinvesting in an international business rather than buying back their own stock? This turns out to be accretive by a couple of cents, but that's because you're borrowing money cheaply. If they had used the same amount of money and bought back stock at now 7 times EBITDA for the cable business, it would have been about 7 or 8 times as accretive. So what the market is frustrated with is this is really a diversification move. And now, play this out a little bit, right? So what are they going to do with this? They're going to now have to significantly invest in proprietary content to backfill for the potential eventual loss of things like Disney and HBO and Showtime that go direct to consumer. So they've got to do the same pivot that Netflix does. That means this is going to be followed by more spending to ramp production. In order to create...
Because they're going to have to create their own Netflix long term.
In order to create their own Netflix long term. And then the question is, so Netflix doesn't make money. The question is, are they going to get anything like a Netflix valuation for something like a Netflix?
Though. I mean,
no, but is the market going to embrace the idea that, okay, you've created a large, potentially money-losing business, and you've got to outrun the secular decline in a satellite business you just paid 15.5 times for?
Can I say, one of the things that we're afraid with Disney doing was Disney has an over-the-top strategy. By buying a satellite company, we saw it at odds with their over-the-top strategy. So their story is cleaner because of that. And now to Craig's point is, well, Comcast is going to have to invest in both traditional and new distribution. And that's conflicting for investors.
Let me just ask you a separate question, though, on Disney. And also, there's this Hulu piece that's still lying out there. There's speculation. 2 things. A, does Disney tender into, or Disney Fox, effectively, tender into this offer, or do they sit as minority shareholders in all of this? Let's start there.
I think they tender, but before they tender, they say to Brian Roberts, we'll tender, but we want to make a trade. We want our Hulu stake.
You think there's a swap for Hulu?
I would think that's what the first thing they're thinking is.
Okay, but what kind of leverage do they have to even force the sale of Hulu? I would argue that basically you either you either tender in at this higher price, or you get to sit around at a much lower price where shareholders are going to look at you and go, "What are you doing?"
You only pay a premium once
Right,
to buy an ownership.
right,
position.
but-
And I would just point out that that Disney traditionally doesn't like to have a tremendous amount of leverage, right? So they're going to be 2.5 times levered.
So they're going to want to sell into this.
Yeah, they're
so
gonna,
what
they need
leverage
to
do they
invest
have
the
on this?
RSNs
I've
and they
heard this
invest
Hulu swap
Well,
idea.
Well, here's why. You can't, Comcast will consolidate, 61% of it. But can they cut costs in the way they want to because you have a minority partner? Can they do, transfers of value between NBC and Sky because it's a minority partner? Having someone at 39% watch your business and block things is not a good way to be either. How many companies like to have?
But no, but I'm saying,
you
but
could say
I
the
think
same
we're all
about
saying
Hulu.
that Disney's not in a position to sit around and just try to play that game.
Well, Disney,
And that shareholders are going to look at them and say, you didn't take the offer when you had a chance, and now you're going to sit here with no rights whatsoever and watch this play out just to be a spoiler. I'm not sure that they'd take that gamble. But
Yeah, but remember, this you could say exactly the same thing about Comcast, right? Comcast now has they've said they want to delever they're not highly levered after this transaction. They're about 2.9. That's not terrible, but they've said they want to delever, so they will be looking for some kind of compensation to help delever, and they would be in the same position, which is now we have a minority stake in Hulu that we have no control.